Have you ever stopped to think about how pretty small organ in the male body can have such a huge impact on health, I mean, but also what it tells us about history and even evolution? Today on the deep dive, we're giving you that shortcut. We're going to make you really well informed about it. We are taking a deep dive into the prostate. We'll unpack its structure, its surprising functions, and the common conditions that affect it, especially as men get older, and hopefully give you some useful insights.
Yeah, and for this, we've looked at some really solid sources. Think detailed medical encyclopedias, comprehensive health guides. We want this to be thorough, but, also really accessible.
Okay, so our mission today, unpack everything you need to know, from the microscopic details and how we even figured this stuff out historically to the big picture health implications and, yeah, practical advice. Let's dive in. All right, so let's start simple. What is the prostate exactly? Fundamentally, it's an accessory gland, part of the male reproductive system. But what's really cool, I think, is how it also acts like a muscle-driven switch, directing traffic for urination or ejaculation. It's like a little biological crossroads.
That's a great way to put it. And its location really underlines that. It sits right below the bladder, just in front of the rectum. And it actually wraps around part of the urethra. Size-wise, yeah, think walnut, roughly. In adults, usually weighs around maybe 11 grams, give or take.
And the name itself, prostate, it has a pretty neat origin story. It comes from ancient Greek prostatos. Means something like one who stands before, or protector, a guardian, which fits, right?
It does now, yeah.
But interestingly, the term apparently caused some confusion way back when. It was initially used for the seminal vesicles by mistake.
Right, a bit of early anatomical mix-up. But eventually it landed on the right gland, the one that really does kind of stand guard over that pathway.
Okay, so we know what it is, roughly where it is. Let's peel back the layers now, look inside, because the internal structure is surprisingly detailed. And how we view that structure has changed, hasn't it? Historically, it was all about lobes.
Yeah, that was the older way. But now, especially with modern imaging like ultrasound or MRI, we mostly talk about zones. It gives a much clearer, more clinically relevant picture.
Zones. Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So the main one is the peripheral zone, the PZ. Makes up most of the gland, like 70%. And critically, this is where the vast majority of prostate cancers start, maybe 70 to 80%.
Wow, okay. That's significant.
Definitely. Then you have the central zone, or CZ, smaller, about 20%, surrounds the ejaculatory ducts. Cancers here are less common, thankfully, maybe 2.5%, but they can be more aggressive, more likely to invade the seminal vesicles.
And the third main one?
That's the transition zone, the TZ. It's actually pretty small initially, only about 5%. It wraps around the urethra, closer to the bladder. But this is the zone that tends to grow throughout a man's life. And that growth is what causes BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia, or enlargement.
Ah, okay, so that's the culprit for BPH.
Primarily, yes, though about 10 to 20% of prostate cancers can also originate in the TZ.
And there was another area sometimes mentioned.
Right, the anterior fibromuscular zone, or stroma. It's, well, mostly muscle and fibrous tissue, not really glandular, so not always classed as a distinct functional zone in the same way.
Got it. So the zones are the key way we understand it functionally now, even though you might still hear about the old five lobes, sometimes anterior, posterior, etc.
Exactly. The zones map much better to what we see on imaging and where diseases tend to occur. And if you zoom right in microscopically, it's a mix of glands and connective tissue. The glands have these column-shaped cells. They make the fluid. These glands drain into ducts, which lead to the urethra. And within that supporting tissue, you've got smooth muscle fibers. And interestingly, over time, these little hardened secretions called corpora amylacea can build up in the glands, usually harmless.
Okay, so it's quite a complex little factory on the inside. And like any factory, it needs supply lines, right? Blood vessels, drainage.
Absolutely. It has a rich blood supply from several arteries, and the blood drains out through a network of veins called the prostatic venous plexus, and it has lymphatic drainage too, which is important because, well, that's one way things like infection or cancer cells can potentially spread. Different zones drain to different lymph nodes nearby.
Fascinating. And what about its activity at the genetic level?
It's very active, actually. Something like 3/4 of all our protein-coding genes are expressed there. But 150 proteins are pretty much prostate-specific, and maybe 20 are highly specific.
Like PSA.
Exactly. Prostate-specific antigen, PSA is a big one, that and prostatic acid phosphatase. These proteins are really important for, giving semen its characteristics, making it liquid enough for sperm to swim.
So bringing this all together, It develops from specific tissues in the embryo, needs male hormones like testosterone, especially a form called DHT, to grow and function. And it naturally gets bigger over time, usually up until a man's 30s or so, before the transition zone growth might kick in later, causing BPH.
Precisely. That baseline growth is normal development.
Okay, so we've got a handle on the structure. Now let's talk function. What does this gland actually do? Because it does some pretty critical stuff.
Absolutely critical. Its main job, you could say, is in ejaculation. It makes a fluid that's a big part of semen, up to about 30% of the total volume.
30%?
Yeah. And this fluid isn't just filler. It's slightly alkaline, milky white looking, contains really important things. Enzymes, zinc, PSA, like we mentioned. That alkalinity is key. It helps neutralize the naturally acidic environment of the vaginal tract, helps sperm survive longer.
Ah, okay, so it protects the sperm.
Protects them, helps them move better. The prostatic fluid actually comes out early in the ejaculation sequence, kind of paving the way, boosts motility, survival, even protects their DNA. And it's the main source of metals, like zinc, in semen.
So a major role in reproduction. What about urination? You mentioned it was like a switch.
Right. That's its other, maybe less obvious, but vital job. It acts as that mechanical switch. It has muscle systems inside. One set helps pull the urethra open wider for urination. Another set essentially closes off the path to the bladder and opens the path for ejaculation when needed. It directs the flow.
Like a traffic controller.
Exactly. Which brings us back to surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Things like BPH surgery can sometimes affect these muscles, which is why changes in urination or ejaculation can happen afterwards. It's a delicate setup.
Okay, and then there's the perhaps more surprising function, sexual stimulation.
Yes, this is quite interesting. For some men, direct stimulation of the prostate through massage, for example, or during anal intercourse can actually lead to orgasm on its own.
The male G-spot idea.
That's the popular term for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Referencing the area of the rectal wall right next to the prostate. It just shows how our understanding evolves. And organ-C, mainly for reproduction, also has this role in sexual response for some. Challenges some older views.
Definitely adds another layer of complexity. But of course, with these vital roles comes susceptibility to problems. Let's talk about the clinical side, the common conditions.
Right. This is important. First up, there's prostatitis. Basically, inflammation or infection of the gland.
What causes that?
Can be bacteria, or it can be non-infective inflammation. The symptoms often involve painful urination or ejaculation, maybe groin pain, difficulty urinating sometimes, or even just feeling generally unwell, like feverish or tired.
And how's it treated?
Well, if it's bacterial, then antibiotics are key. For the chronic non-bacterial kind, it's more complex. It can involve pain management, sometimes alpha blockers to relax muscles, anti-inflammatories, even things like physical therapy or psychotherapy in some chronic pain cases. Combination therapies often work best for the tricky chronic forms.
Okay. Then the really common one, especially in older guys, prostate enlargement, BPH.
Benign prostatic hyperplasia.
Yeah.
Super common. It's not cancer, that's important. It's just the gland getting bigger because the cells, particularly in that transition zone, multiply.
And the symptoms are mostly urinary.
Mostly. Things like having to pee more often, especially at night, trouble starting this dream, a weak flow, feeling like you haven't fully emptied your bladder. In severe cases, it can really squeeze the urethra shut, makes urination painful or even impossible. That's called urinary retention. And if urine backs up, it can affect the kidneys. Hydronephrosis.
So what's the fix for BPH?
Often starts with medication. Alpha blockers, like tamsulosin, relax the muscles in the prostate and bladder neck, making it easier to pee. Lifestyle changes can help too. If meds aren't enough, there are minimally invasive options using heat or needles to shrink tissue. Or surgery, like the TURP procedure, transurethral resection of the prostate, where they remove excess tissue.
Okay. And that brings us to the big one, prostate cancer.
Yes. One of the most common cancers in men, particularly older men. Very prevalent in places like the UK, US, Northern Europe, Australia. And it's a significant cause of cancer death.
What increases the risk?
Age is the biggest factor, definitely. Family history plays a role. Men of African ancestry have a higher risk. And some studies suggest diet might be involved, high red meat intake, maybe low vegetable intake.
And symptoms? Are they obvious?
Often, no. Not in the early stages, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
When symptoms do appear, they can mimic BPH frequency, urgency, weak stream. Less commonly, things like weight loss or back pain might signal that it's spread, metastasized.
So how is it usually picked up?
Diagnosis usually starts with a couple of things. A digital rectal exam, the DRE, where a doctor feels the prostate, and the PSA blood test, prostate-specific antigen.
Let's talk about PSA for a second, because it's common but maybe misunderstood.
Very much so. So PSA is a protein the prostate makes. High levels can mean cancer. But, and this is the crucial part, high levels can also be caused by BPH or prostatitis or even recent ejaculation or bike riding.
So a high PSA isn't a definite cancer diagnosis.
Absolutely not. PSA levels can fluctuate. And this leads to the controversy around widespread screening. There's a real risk of overdiagnosis, finding slow-growing cancers that might never have caused harm if left alone, but leading to treatments with side effects. It's a complex balance.
So if the DRE or PSA is suspicious, what's next?
Usually a prostate biopsy. Tiny samples of tissue are taken to check for cancer cells and see how aggressive they might be. If cancer's found, imaging tests like MRI or a bone scan might be done to see if it has spread.
And treatment depends heavily on that staging, right?
Completely. If it's localized, just in the prostate, options include surgery to remove the prostate, that's radical prostatectomy, or radiation therapy, either external beam or internal seeds, called brachytherapy.
What if it has spread?
Then the main treatment is usually hormone therapy. The goal is to starve the cancer of male hormones, androgens, that fuel its growth. Often uses drugs called GnRH analogs, or drugs that block the hormone receptors. Sometimes, rarely now, surgical removal of the testes was done.
And if the cancer becomes resistant,
Then chemotherapy might be an option, like docetaxel, or more targeted radiation for pain relief if it's spread to bones. But there's also another important option, active surveillance. For small, localized, less aggressive cancers, especially in older men or those with other health issues, instead of immediate treatment, the cancer is monitored very closely.
watching and waiting, essentially.
Kind of, but a very active watching.
Yeah.
Regular PSA tests, exams, maybe routine biopsies. The idea is to avoid treatment side effects unless the cancer shows signs of progressing. It's a really valid approach for many men.
You mentioned prostatectomy, the surgery. Let's just quickly cover that. Done for cancer and BPH.
Right. Radical prostatectomy for cancer involves removing the whole gland, plus the seminal vesicles usually. QRP for BPH just removes the enlarged inner tissue, can be done via open surgery or, more commonly now, laparoscopically keyhole surgery, sometimes robot-assisted.
And the potential downsides, complications.
Yeah, there are potential risks, like with any major surgery. Specifically after radical prostatectomy for cancer, the main concerns are urinary incontinence leakage and erectile dysfunction, ED, because the nerves controlling erections run very close to the prostate. There's also loss of ejaculation, obviously, and infertility. Orgasm might feel different, sometimes painful, maybe a slight change in penis length, plus the usual surgical risks, infection, bleeding, clots.
Okay. It's a lot to consider. Now let's shift gears completely. Let's look back. How did we even learn all this? What's the history here?
It's a fascinating journey. The prostate itself wasn't really formally identified until the Renaissance. Niccolò Massa in 1536, then the famous anatomist Andres Vesalius illustrated it in 1538.
And the name itself, prostate, took a while to settle, as we mentioned. André de Laurence is often credited around 1600. Before that, confusion with the seminal vesicles.
Right. And even the idea of it being a single organ, not a pair, took time to become standard, maybe early 18th century. William Cheselden used the English term prostate. Anatomical understanding kept evolving. Descriptions of the lobes came later. But the big shift, really, was John McNeill's work in 1968, proposing the zones. That fundamentally changed how we looked at it from a clinical perspective.
And what about understanding the diseases, prostate cancer history?
Well, it was first described medically by John Adams in 1853. But, like we said, probably seemed rare back then. Shorter lives, less detection.
And treatments were rudimentary.
Extremely. Early surgeries were just about relieving the urinary blockage, not curing cancer. Remember Samuel David Gross in 1851 calling the idea of removing the whole gland absurd?
Wow. Times change.
They certainly do. Hugh Young performed the first radical prostatectomy for cancer in 1904. A major step.
Then TRP came along later for BPH symptoms, often preferred because it had fewer side effects like ED compared to the early radical surgeries.
Exactly. And then Patrick Walsh refined the radical prostatectomy technique in 1983, developing nerve-sparing approaches to try and preserve function better.
And the hormone connection, that was huge, right? Nobel Prize huge.
Absolutely. Charles Huggins discovered in the 1940s that blocking testosterone, often using estrogen back then, could fight metastatic prostate cancer. That insight won him the Nobel in '66. It was the birth of hormone therapy for prostate cancer. Then the work on GnRH, The hormone controlling testosterone production by Shalley and Gilmanu, another Nobel in '77, led directly to the modern GnRH agonist drugs we use today. Big breakthroughs. Radiation therapy also evolved from early radium implants to modern external beams and brachytherapy. Chemotherapy really started being explored in the '70s.
It's an incredible arc of discovery and innovation. Okay, so we've covered humans pretty thoroughly, but you mentioned this is a mammalian gland. What about other animals?
Yeah, this is where comparative anatomy gets really interesting. Only mammals have a prostate, and its size and structure vary wildly. Marsupials, like kangaroos, have a proportionally larger one than we do. Some animals have what's called a disseminate prostate, not a distinct lump, but glandular tissues scattered within the urethral wall. Small ruminants, marsupials, have this. Some, like red deer, have both types.
And dogs. You mentioned they were special.
Very special in this context. The prostate is the only accessory sex gland male dogs have. They produce a lot of prostatic fluid, partly for scent marking. And here's the kicker. Dogs are the only species besides humans known to get prostate cancer at a significant rate. Why? Good question. Maybe something about domestication, lifespan, hormones. We don't fully know.
Fascinating. Whales and dolphins, too.
Cetaceans also only have the prostate. Again, it's more diffuse glands around the urethra with a strong muscle. It really reinforces that connection between the prostate's development from the urethral wall and why enlargement causes urinary issues across species.
And the secretions vary, too.
Yeah, the basic function alkaline fluid with sugars is similar, but the specific components can differ between mammal groups.
Okay, and one more twist. The female prostate. Skene's gland.
Right. Skene's gland in females is considered homologous to the male prostate, meaning it develops the exact same embryonic tissues. It's the biological equivalent. And interestingly, it also produces PSA and prostatic acid phosphatase, much like the male prostate. Its function is still debated, but the shared origin and secretions are clear.
Wow. Okay, so after exploring all of that, the anatomy, the function, the problems, the history, even other animals, let's bring it back home. What are the practical takeaways for maintaining prostate health?
Right, the actionable stuff. It mostly boils down to good general health practices, honestly. First, diet. Focus on fruits, vegetables, healthy fats. Things like lycopene in tomatoes, antioxidants in green tea, omega-3s. There's good evidence these support prostate health. And maybe limit red meat and high-fat dairy. The link isn't definitive for everyone, but it's often suggested.
Makes sense. What about lifestyle?
Regular exercise is key. Maintaining a healthy weight is important. Obesity is linked to increased risk or more aggressive forms of prostate cancer.
And avoiding harmful habits.
Definitely. Smoking is a major risk factor for many cancers, potentially including more aggressive prostate cancer. Limiting alcohol is generally good advice, too.
And finally, checkups.
Crucial, especially after 50 or earlier, say, 40 or 45, if you have risk factors like being of African ancestry or having a father or brother with prostate cancer. Talk to your doctor. Discuss your personal risk. Decide together if screening with PSA is right for you, weighing the pros and cons we talked about.
It's about informed discussion, not just automatic testing.
Exactly. It's a personal decision based on risk, age, health, and values. So yeah, to sum up this deep dive, the prostate. It's small, but wow, it has a huge, complex impact on male health. It connects biology, history, even evolution across species in some really intricate ways.
Absolutely. And we've seen that conditions like BPH, prostatitis, prostate cancer, they're common, sure, but often very manageable, and especially if you catch things early. Really, education like this, talking with your doctor, screening appropriately, and living a healthy lifestyle, those are your best tools for protecting your prostate and just your overall well-being. So here's something to think about as we wrap up. How does this deep dive into just one small gland maybe change how you see the human body? Does it reveal this incredible symphony of tiny parts all interconnected with these huge implications? Does it make you more curious about the hidden wonders inside us and maybe even how we compare to the rest of the animal kingdom?